During recent years, a great many of my numerous friends have constantly urged me to tell various stories and experiences with which from time to time I may have either bored or amused them. I fear more frequently the former, although they have been kind enough to say that many of the incidents that I have stored in a somewhat retentive memory are worth recording. My home life in Norfolk was a truly happy one. 5 brothers, the best of friends, having the same tastes in common, and 1 sister into whom we tried to instill manly games, an indulgent father and a devoted mother to whom we were even more than devoted. She died in February 1914, within a few weeks of completing her 90th year, in complete possession of all her faculties to the end. Within an hour of her death, she was discussing with me the possibility of the Irish controversy which was raging at the time over Ulster, producing civil war. We had an excellent cricket ground at our home, Middleton Towers, and used to have some delightful matches in those days. A great deal of what was called social cricket was played at the time, and we flattered ourselves that during our annual week in August, we produced talent of no mean order for the general amusement of the countryside. My brother Kerry was a very fine cricketer, having been a member of the famous Cambridge 11 of 1878. Probably the best varsity 11 that ever existed, actually, which comprised Edward and Alfred Littleton, A.P. Lucas, D.Q. Steele, A.G. Steele, Ivo Bligh, Herbert Whitfield, of course you remember him, P.H. Morton, F.W. Kingston, A.F.J. Ford, and my brother, L.K. Jarvis. Some 4 years later, I first had the honour of being spoken to by His Majesty on the occasion of a cricket match played at Sandringham on the 17th and 18th of July, 1866. Invitations to witness the match had been extended to many of their country neighbours by the Prince and Princess, and I, at that time quite a small little shaver, was allowed to accompany my father and my mother. Many incidents fixed themselves indelibly upon my memory, the chief one being the fact the Prince had actually shaken me by the hand and spoken a few kind words to me. The Norfolk gentleman, this is a very amusing incident, the Norfolk gentleman had a very good fast bowler named Wright, and it was suggested to him on all sides that he might deal leniently with the Prince when he came into bat, for he had never taken up cricket to any extent and was therefore not an adept at the game, but everyone was anxious that he should make a few runs. Wright deliberately refused, and to everyone's annoyance, bowled him out first ball. In the county election, however, we were completely successful. The Conservative candidates, Sir William Baggy and the Honourable T. de Grey, afterwards Lord Walsingham, were triumphantly returned, and I remember my father on the day of the election, dear old man, entertaining all the farmers in the district to breakfast at Middleton Towers, and afterwards driving to Lynn, followed by a long string of carriages, carts, gigs, etc., to the self-same hustings, where all these noble men of the land, these workers, all publicly declared that they had voted for Baggy and de Grey. How very different from the elections of today. And then I met Cecil Rhodes. He was at times terribly misunderstood, but those of us who had the inestimable privilege of sharing his inmost thoughts knew how disinterested and entirely free from self were his great aspirations, and consequently were never tired of fighting his battle. I remember he used to say, "The Anglo-Saxon race, England and America, should rule the world." Rhodes was never tired of telling me how fortunate I was to have the opportunity of taking a practical part in the development of our great and glorious empire. One moonlight night during the Matabele War, of which I shall have a few more words to say later on, we were on the march, expecting to have a brush with the Matabele at daybreak, when he suddenly said out of the blue, "How glorious this is, Weston-Jarvis, and what a lucky fellow you are to be here. Now look here, why are you here? Well, you are here because turnips in Norfolk didn't pay. Now, suppose turnips in Norfolk had paid, what would your life have been? Well, I suppose you would have been a quite ordinary kind of country gentleman and a fairly respectable member of Parliament. God, what a life! How much better to be here, out here, under the stars, working out great problems under canvas in a tent. Monday. February the 4th. Entrained at Alexandria, arrived Ramley at 12 o'clock. Brisk action commenced at 1. Spider Jimmy Hooker and Harry Rutledge arrived on the battlefield back from leave in a cab and joined battle. Major Burnham, the noted scout, in his delightful book entitled Scouting on Two Continents, has told the story of the pursuit of the king when he fled from Bulawayo across the Shangani River, and has given us a thrilling account of the slaughter of those devoted men under the command of Alan Wilson, who, when surrounded by hordes of Matabele warriors and cut off from any hope of relief by the river coming down in flood and their last cartridge expended, were assegaied, that is, spurred to death to a man, singing God Save the Queen. Singing God Save the Queen. Surely their death on, let me see, the 3rd of December, 1893, will remain an epic of Rhodesia for all time. In Delhi, we had the state service on the polo ground on Sunday the 4th of January. More than 10,000 troops were drawn up in front of the polo pavilion, which was crowded with the Viceroy's guests, and from the steps of which the Bishop of Calcutta read the service. A quarter of a mile from the pavilion, and in the rear of the troops were drawn up the massed bands of the European regiments, numbering nearly 1,000 instruments, which, even in the open air and at that distance, sounded like an organ in the cathedral. The responses were intoned, and hymns and chants sung from 200 to 300 of the bandsmen, each of them having a megaphone, and every word being distinctly audible. Of course, the responses, etc., were all arranged by signal, but so well were the signals timed that although the conductor of the bands could not hear the bishop's voice, every response and Amen came in at exactly the right moment. I noticed that the hymn Onward Christian Soldiers, always such a favourite with Tommy Atkins, the ordinary soldier, had not been included in the service, and afterwards I asked Lord Curzon the reason. "Ah," he said, "I will give you the same answer which I gave to Kitchener when he suggested that hymn. You will remember that one verse begins with the words, 'Crowns and thrones may perish, kingdoms rise and wane.' Well, don't you see, kingdoms don't rise and wane, nor do crowns and thrones perish, at least not in India." On the eve of our departure from India, the Duke gave a farewell dinner on the quarterdeck to the Governor and Lady Northcote, General Sir Robert Lowe, General Sir James Wilcox, and various other officials, during which a very amusing episode occurred. We suddenly heard shouts of, "Catch him! Stop him!" etc., when onto the quarterdeck dashed a practically naked savage, gesticulating wildly and talking very fast in some unknown Woggish tongue. He turned out to be the Mahout, or elephant boy, who had been sent down in charge of the elephant, and never having seen the sea, and having delivered his charge safely on board, had been under the mistaken impression that he would be free to return to his native village, but had just realized that he was to sail into the unknown early the next morning. It seems that upon arrival, the elephant had seized cutlasses and everything he could reach with his trunk, and thrown them about indiscriminately. And Captain Farquhar had rightly decided that he would not be responsible for the elephant's behaviour without him, hence the trouble. Luckily, Sir James Wilcox and Lionel Herbert were able to make themselves understood to him, and he was pacified by being told that he must at any rate go as far as Aden, when, if a blue jacket could be by that time found to qualify for his job, he should be returned in store. But when we got to Aden, this is very amusing, he was told that he was come on to Suez. By that time, he had been made so much of by the blue jackets, who used to rig him up in every kind of kit every day, that he had become quite at home in his new surroundings and eventually remained in charge for the whole voyage. You know, I last saw him some 2 months later, still in charge of his elephant, at the Dublin Zoo on a pouring wet day, and I've often wondered if the poor devil ever got back to his native land. A very amusing incident. Wednesday. German aeroplanes sighted over our lines. Thursday. German aeroplane dropped small bomb. Shape of lady's hand mower filled full of iron filings. Friday. German aeroplane shot down. Pilot and navigator hand upped. We found on the pilot various papers of an official nature and some photographs of scantily dressed females. It just goes to show you what so-and-sos these Germans are, to come over our line in wartime in such an aeroplane, dropping a bomb shape of lady's hand mower filled full of iron filings. But what is worse, with such dubious photographs. Cecil Rhodes and Lord Milner have constantly inspired me throughout my humble life. I therefore learned and keep in constant remembrance 3 great lessons from those 2 great men. 1. I am an Englishman and have consequently drawn the greatest prize in the lottery of life. 2. Difficulties are only created that they may be surmounted. And 3, and note this, everyone can help. The march of what is called democracy is no doubt a terrible handicap, but I have learned throughout my life that no situation has ever been created without the right man being forthcoming to fill it. And if everyone can help, democracy can yet be educated along right lines. When the time comes for me to give up my daily task and join the great almighty scorer up above, I shall be content if I thought it would be said of me, he was a humble old devil, but you know, he did his best to help.